Introduction. So welcome to our talk here on wildlife-friendly gardening. My name is Petra Unger, and I originally put together this presentation as my student presentation when I became a master gardener, and I have since updated it a few times based on requests from, to give this talk or new things I have done in our own garden to make it more wildlife-friendly and do some updates. So the whole idea of wildlife-friendly gardening for me was based on this idea to have habitat instead of just lawn. And so in this presentation, I have some ideas for your home garden. And that's based on the conversion of our lawn at the time to a mix of more natural habitat, but we also have some edibles out there. Water conservation was one of our goals, and we converted our own front yard in Davis, California, over time. So originally we did a house remodel in 2011, and as part of that took out the lawn in front of the house, which is what you see our landscape here right now. And then the backyard we converted in 2016 using incentives that were provided by the Department of Water Resources, which was basically a lawn rebate. They offered, funds to convert square feet of lawn to a more drought-resistant landscape. And so you could provide a plan of how you would convert it and pre and post conversion photos, and then you got a rebate for your lawn. And there's other agencies, cities and counties that have these incentives still going right now. So we converted to a mix of vegetables and fruit trees, but also lots of native and some non-native but non-invasive ornamentals. This is also based on my personal interest in biology. So I'm a biologist by training, specifically a botanist. So I love native plants and beautiful flowering plants, but I also just like to observe wildlife in our own backyard. So here's some of the scenes of things. All of what you see here, or most of what you see here, was previously lawn. And so as you can see, we have converted this to a mix of sort of the mulched landscapes along with flowering native plants for, showiness, but also nectar. But you can also see that we have some raised gardens with drip irrigation for vegetables. And then this is kind of on all sides of the house, the backyard, the front yard, the side yard, and just some ideas on how we're integrating kind of these fun other elements like our little library surrounded by our California poppies in the landscape as well. So why wildlife-friendly gardening? So first of all, we want to provide habitat for some of the other species besides the humans, and also support conservation at the local scale, but it can also help you manage pests such as insects and other things. It's fun to watch or educational. We sometimes have our neighbors have their little kids walk through and explain to them. You can support citizen science if you're into that and report those observations of birds or insects or other wildlife you make in your own front yard. And then everybody can do their part in habitat restoration. So when I first put this presentation together, I was inspired by some information from Doug Tallamy, who's a professor of entomology and wildlife ecology at the University of Delaware. And he has pretty extensively published on the topic on why, he believes in these kind of natives in your front yard. And you see a quote from him here saying, in the past, mostly we wanted groomed landscapes or just pretty gardens, but now we also want to sequester carbon and feed our pollinators and manage water and in turn provide habitat. So, and he does a lot of work on this importance of local habitat because, every little square inch of habitat counts. In his research, he's documented that only 5% of landmass in the lower 48 states remains completely natural. So if you think of it in that way, then, kind of pushing some habitat back towards a more natural state that provides for other species as well really counts. And gardens can provide a lot of nice habitat for animals. And then in terms of these ecosystems or these native landscapes we produce provide ecosystem services through the animals inhabit it, like pest control or pollination or seed dispersal. So how can you support wildlife in your own backyard? So there's different ways to do that. One of them is through host plans. So a host plant is a specific plant that is needed by a specific wildlife species for food. And the food can be the nectar or the berries or even the greens. And so again, based on the research by Dr. Tallamy, native landscapes provide a lot of habitat, about 35 more times than non-native landscapes for native butterflies and their caterpillars. And then in turn, 90% of our terrestrial birds rely on insects to feed their young, and specifically on those caterpillars, because they're really great and nutritious food. So here's some example of those butterflies in the California landscape and the plants that they depend on. So on the top right here, this is the pipevine swallowtail, native butterfly on the pipevine leaf. And so this butterfly only lays its eggs on the particular leaves of the Dutchman's pipe. We planted one of those Dutchman's pipe in our garden, and 2 years later, we had pipevine swallowtail butterflies. One that's a lot more well-known maybe is the California monarch with its caterpillar and its butterfly here. And of course, they use different species of milkweed as their host plants. So we planted a lot of milkweed in our garden too, that's now reseeding, and we definitely get monarchs coming through pretty regularly too. And then on the bottom right here, that's the California sister butterfly, which is using California native oak trees as its hosts. So these are three examples of very specific host relationships. There's some that are more widely distributed, but in any case, if you have native plants, you tend to get native butterflies. And same goes for birds. So here you can see Anna's hummingbird feeding on a bladder pot, which this picture is from the Yolo County Audubon, but we certainly have both of these species in our backyards as well. And you can see that those showy flowers, they're very pretty, they're very drought resistant. It's a desert plant, but they also provide very important wildlife habitat for many species. And a good other example here would be the California fuchsia or Sauschneria californica, which is also providing very great hummingbird habitat. Here's another example of the cedar waxwing, beautiful bird in the winter, and they tend to feed on these berries of toyon or Heteromeles arbutifolia, which is also called Christmas berry, if you're familiar with that. And you can certainly see this in the yard, but also along the green belt and in other places, that in the winter there's literally like feeding frenzies of flocks of waxwing on these red berried bushes. So these caterpillars, they're absolutely essential in transferring energy from the plants to the animals, but they're also a source of important nutrients for the young birds, such as carotenoids and essential elements. And really, as I mentioned, most native songbirds rear their young on caterpillars because they're just, abundant in the native habitat. They're soft, large, and very nutritious. So one comparison here is like one caterpillar in terms of nutritional value to young birds is equivalent to 200 aphids. And so for the magnitude of how much of these are needed, about 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars are needed just by a pair of birds to raise one clutch of chicks. And as you might know, our native birds, several of them in a good year raise several clutch of chicks. So if they have a lot of butterflies, they can raise a lot of young, which of course then will amplify the number of birds in your habitat. And then there are some really beautiful native host plants, such as these shrubs. And so all of them also then host beneficial insects, which are here. These are confirmed host plants for butterfly and moths native to California. So on the top left here, we see the California redbud. To the right, top right, is the Fremontodendron californicum, California flannelbush. On the bottom right is a species of manzanita, and then the California lilac on the bottom right. And all of these definitely are very beautiful to look at, both in the spring when they're in bloom, or even their leaves and foliage, attractive shrubs, and they all are great hosts for wildlife. And a similar thing is true for host plants that are perennial. So meaning, plants that persist in the landscape as kind of not as shrubs or trees, but as persistent plants. And so we have, again, confirmed host plants for California moth and butterflies. On the top left here is the Matilaha poppy. Top right is the sticky monkey flower. Bottom left is a penstemon. There are many species native to California, very drought resistant, many of them available as horticultural cultivars. And then the bottom right is sage, hummingbird sage, which is another good host plant for hummingbirds. And this one flowers in the winter or like really early spring when other plants might not be as abundant. So that's another thing in having a variety of plants. You will have a host habitat kind of throughout the season. Here's one great tool that any gardener or really anybody can use to maybe design or think about how you want to convert or plant your lawn. So this is called the CalScape Garden Planner, and this is available through the California Native Plant Society. And this tool was developed to enable California landscapers to offer kind of more drought resistance or native habitat planning tools, but also for any kind of gardener to get ideas. So what you do in here is, I went in here and said, I am in Davis, California. So you pick your choices and it asks you your gardening style. So I like California natural habitats. You can put in here, you like formal English gardens or whatever. And then what your shade type is this full sun? Is this area partial shade? And then what are your special interests? So I picked bird watching just as an example. And then also on the right here, you can pick design ideas. So based on these 4 criteria, they will give you kind of layout plans on what this might look like. And then they will also give you a list of plants that would be suitable for that kind of habitat, as well as what they need in terms of water, what their flower color is, the size they have, and even on the right here, what kind of wildlife they would attract. So this is a fabulous tool for anybody. It's super easy to use, especially if you're maybe not familiar with the plants as much, and it will give you, lists of plants to plant as well as layout plans for your garden. So I highly recommend this tool. Other features that you can do to attract birds in your yard. Well, first of all, you want to ideally avoid pesticides. So if you have, native wildlife in your yard, the birds will help keep those insects in check. And we really don't have any problems with insects in our yard or with many pests. And so I think partially that is because we have a lot of birds and bats and other things. So something you can do to support your birds visiting year round, but especially in the winter months, is you can install bird feeders. They get high usage during the winter or during spring and fall migration. And so what you want to do here is use high energy foods such as sunflower seeds. You want to keep them maintained and clean so you don't particularly spread any diseases or something. And then if you use the hummingbird feeders, those little red ones, those really need to be cleaned out or the nectar replaced every 3 to 5 days. And then you can see here they're hung on these kind of metal rods, which protects them from rodents. They're not able to climb up on these things and kind of, clear out the feeders. What we do get is some of our blue jays have learned to hang on to these upside down and trying to get a lot of the food that's planned for maybe other songbirds out of there, but it's also, that's kind of fun to watch, and they're only so successful. If you do have feeders, you want to look for any local alerts, such as in California or specifically in Davis, we had an outbreak of salmonella a while ago that was affecting pine siskins. So the local Audubon actually asked everybody to take down their feeders for a little while to not attract places where they would aggregate in large numbers and maybe spread that disease. So if you do have feeders, they're a lot of fun, but they definitely do require some maintenance, and then you want to be aware of anything else going on with the bird populations. Here's a fun project related to those bird feeders. It's from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is a well-known lab for bird studies. And so again, what I did here is I typed in the winter region. I'm in the northwest of the United States, and I'm putting black oil sunflower seeds in my feeder into a large feeder tube, and it will tell you a list of birds you can expect based on the range and the food in your region in winter. So it'll give you this little list of, you know, colorful pictures with which birds they are, and it's really easy to identify who's coming to your feeder. Or reversely, if you say, I want these kinds of birds attracted to my yard, I'm gonna pick the food type that will attract certain birds. And so this kind of goes to that citizen science crossover, and there's just some fun tools out there to play with as you are designing your yard. You know, water features are really nice. We have water features in both the front and back, and they're constantly visited by a variety of wildlife, especially during migration or in the summer when it's really hot. And they provide, of course, drinking water, but also water for bathing. Birds really like moving water, and this also prevents mosquitoes from breeding in there. So both of our water fountains or features are fountains that are constantly cycling through. They do need some management because they tend to grow algae, so you need to clean them out regularly. And if you use those flat dishes that are not, you know, flowing through, you really do need to clean them every day to keep them from growing too much algae. You never want to put in any chemicals such as chlorine or something to prevent that algal growth because it would harm the birds. And if you have a water feature and some native habitat, you can also put up a birdhouse for nesting nearby. So that's a fun another feature. So you can see here on the left, we have a whole flock of songbirds kind of splashing around on the top of this. And our little local hawks have also learned that these guys come in large numbers. So sometimes we see them, you know, waiting here or sitting and surrounding you know, trees or bushes to see if they can maybe snatch one for lunch or something. So you attract all kinds of wildlife and those that depend on that wildlife as well. Important if you want a lot of birds in your backyard is to keep your cats indoors or away from where those birds are. So Yolo County Audubon estimates that outdoor cats kill about 1.3 to 4 billion birds a year in the US. And so this predation from house cats precedes all other mortality courses. So it is really important to, you know, not let the cats out and get after the birds. If you do have cats and you like them out in your yard, you just probably won't get a lot of birds there. So one of the feature I found here online is this catio, which is basically a screened-in patio that enables the cats to be outside and enjoy watching the wildlife, but not necessarily eating it. And the same is for if you have a lot of lizards in your yard, which we certainly have since we've been putting down our, you know, those mulch and other parts. The cats like to go after those as well. And then as mentioned early on, it's also fun to participate in citizen science, meaning where everyday citizens are reporting their, you know, findings and observations online. And so here's a few ideas for great sources for that. There's eBird, which is a birding platform, the Great Backyard Bird Count, where people can go on and report what they've been observing in their own backyard. This Project Feeder Watch I showed earlier, the National Audubon Society does Christmas bird counts every year, and you can participate there. And then a fun feature some of you might be familiar with is iNaturalist, which is a partnership, or was founded as a partnership between National Geographic and the California Academy of Sciences. And it's recently went to being only run by California Academy of Sciences. And so this is an app or feature where you can take a photo of anything you see, whether that be a bird, plant, or a scat or anything, and you can upload it and it'll give you some suggestions for what you see, saying this might be a scrub jay or this would be. So even if you know nothing about plants, and they do native and non-native plants, that's a good way to make some fun observation and start learning, or just even figure out what is growing in your yard or what's growing in somebody else's yard that you might want to grow. And so definitely easy to use app and fun feature. And any of those platforms here will use the data reported by citizens to look at long-term trends in wildlife, in bird populations, in insect populations, and so on. So it's a useful tool to put your data out there for others who might be studying this to observe trends such as climate change, impacts on wildlife, and so on as well. Another fun thing to have in your backyard are bats. We have several native species of bats in California, and they may be roosting in buildings such as attics or chimneys, porches, or eaves. We had quite a few of them in the eaves on our balconies. And so they basically find places that are protecting them from predators and that are stable temperatures and shelter. And you will know you have bats by either, you might observe them as they're emerging from those shelters, or you might just be seeing stains from their oil or droppings. Sometimes you can also hear them. They have really high-pitched sort of clicking noises if you're out at dawn or dusk. And they're beneficial to have around because bats eat a lot of, they basically, a nursing mom with pups eats her weight in insects every night. So they will definitely help keep the local populations of mosquitoes down and things like that. If you don't want to have bats, but you have suitable habitat, you can exclude them by kind of closing out those cracks and crevices. But if you do that, please follow an expert advice on timing and methods, because you don't want to exclude them, at a time when they might be locked in there, or when you might be separating a mom from her pups. So the best time to do that would be in the winter months. So these two photos here are a free-tailed bat up top and a big brown bat at the bottom. You can install a bat house such as the one here on the right. There are kits that you can buy online or at the hardware store to build your own, or you can let them stay in your house. Like I said, we had them on the eaves about our balconies for many years, but we did eventually exclude them there because it was a little messy at times. Don't use pesticides in your yard. Bats are natural pest control and they are sensitive to that. And again, keep your cats indoors if you want bats in your yard. So this is just a list of all the sources I used for this presentation. There are many more. Anything by Doug Tallamy published on Homegrown National Park or Human Nature. And he has lots of great videos out there, publications, and so on. Some websites here for the sources I used, and then of course for the native plants. And with that, I think that's my last slide, so I can stop sharing. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if anybody has questions on any of my presentation.
Petra, there was a couple of questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them, or do you?
I can look, or
okay.
I can, let's see. What was that native blue butterfly? That was the pipevine swallowtail. On the Dutchman's pipe is the plant, Aristolochia californica, and then the butterfly was the pipevine swallowtail. Oh yeah, and I can see somebody answered that. And then can you please use the slideshow function? Oh, I'm sorry about that. Didn't see that. Do I recommend a particular type of brand or bird seed? No, I would say, we buy whatever is on sale there at Ace Hardware or something. They often have, buy one, get one free. If you do want to attract a particular kind of bird, then you might want to look at that to see, who eats, there's some like thistle seeds for little finches. If you do use those though, then you'll also, all the stuff that falls on the ground will obviously sprout into thistles as well. So I don't like thistle seed as a one, but we use, whatever brand and see who comes.
Okay, I just asked everyone if they to unmute so they can ask you questions.
Yeah. And I see John has his hand up. John Whitehead, you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yeah, hi Petra.
Hi, John.
I wonder if you could say hi to Ron. I wonder if you
will.
could say a few words about weeds and your pathways, what your walkways through your yard, and
Mhm.
weeds growing in walkways, or how do you maintain that or build the walkways, or weeds growing in your other plant areas. And maybe another related question is, how important is it if you're not lucky enough to have neighbors who control their weeds?
Yeah, so our walkways, as you saw on, I think, one of the earlier pictures, so we have different types of walkways. So we have kind of the main walkway through the yard is stamped, what do you call it? Decomposed granite, DG, and then we have flagstone walking stops about that. And so on that, like, hardly anything grows because it's so stamped down, and the flagstone walkways.
How deep?
Oh, it's pretty deep. I would say several inches deep. And we installed that with that remodel. And we have kind of refilled some areas of it once just because we had a little extra from somewhere else. So if you have that, I mean, that, if it's stamped and I barely ever have a weed pop up in there. For the rest of the yard, as you saw, we have a lot of mulch there. So I would definitely recommend, like up to 6 inches of mulch. So I know some people like put cardboard down first to kill their lawn and so on. We didn't do that because our lawn was pretty dead after that remodel anyhow. So we literally just converted the drip irrigation and then threw mulch on top. And we do pretty regularly replenish some of that mulch just because, sometimes it blows away or even floats away with winter rains like we had last year. But 6 inches deep of mulch is definitely good for suppressing the weeds. And it's also good as a kind of source of nutrients for your shrubs and whatever grows in that drought resistant landscape. And it also really helps with keeping the watering down because it keeps the moisture in and the sun doesn't beat on the soil. And with that, we barely have any issues with weeds really in the yard. Bindweed is probably the worst one.
So is the surface of your yard 6 inches higher than it was before? And how does that compare to walking in and out of the house, for example?
Oh, got it. Yeah, no, it's definitely not since. So when you put it at 6 inches, but it kind of, like compresses over time, like with rain and whatever. So it like, it gets squished down. So it is a little higher than the walkway, for example, but not higher than the house. And so we just did, we had 3 trees taken out for, various reasons. One of them was being a nuisance, and the other one was just kind of one of those Bradford pears dying, falling apart. So we had them shredded on site and had them leave all the shreddings, and we used that to replenish the mulch. And that definitely was like several inches throughout the yard. And with this recent rain, now it's starting to tamp down. So we keep a lot of mulch on for a lot of reasons. And in response to the mulch, we have a lot of lizards, fence lizards, and they just love, having all that habitat around.
Is there a service where someone will come to your house and grind up your old furniture for you? Just kidding.
Well, if you have a tree service working and you have an old piece of wood, they probably would run it through there. I don't think they'd come just for your furniture.
Thank you.
But there's often, like Yolo County landfill, they give away free compost, which you can also kind of use as mulch in the spring and fall. You just have to go and haul it. We've used wood chips from others that have, just had extra and wanted to share and so on. And we share if you have. So if you keep your eyes open, because it can be quite expensive to buy a lot of mulch like that from, and then you have to have it delivered if you don't have a truck or something. So, but yeah, we replenish all the time. But it's totally worth it because it really does keep the other maintenance down, and it helps with nutrients and weeds for sure. Great. Anybody else have questions?
Petra, just a comment. Chipdrop.com is a clearinghouse for tree companies looking to get rid of wood chips. And if your property is closer than the landfill, then
Uh-huh.
they'll often bring them for free. Or
Great.
you can offer
Mhm.
a small amount of compensation and you may get yours sooner than somebody else.
Yeah, great point, Rich. When we had those 3 trees taken out, they actually, we had asked our neighbors if anybody was interested, and they brought 1 truckload over to our neighbors for free while they were at it too, so.
Very
It's
good.
definitely, but that's a good to know. Anybody else?
Oh, just a follow-up question. I noticed that your presentation was recorded and had so much good information on it. How do we get a copy of your presentation?
After the presentation, I send it to the Yellow County Master Gardeners, and it is uploaded. I'm not sure when, but that's what I do with it.
Very good.
Yeah, and Rich, in the meantime, if you want a copy of the presentation, I'm happy to send it to you as well.
Oh, very good. I will.
Out there for whoever wants to use it, just trying to get the word out.
Excellent.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming. We meet again on November 9th, and Mike is going to do a presentation with a question and answer, and also what we should be doing in the garden now. So that's it. Any last questions, or I'll end the meeting?
Thank you, Joan. Our kids
Okay.
played soccer together. It's
Yeah.
good to see you.
Yeah, yes. Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Petra.